You can work on 2 or 3 priorities at the same time, by the way. You don't have to limit yourself to one at a time. When Dr. Deagle, it's been, 4 years ago now, asked me to make a top 10 list of things for preparedness, it instantly struck me as something very essential, an excellent exercise. I had not done it before. So I put together my top 10 list. And Dr. Deagle and I have talked about that several dozen times the last few years on the Friday afternoon show on Genesis, Dr. Deagle's third hour. As you regular listeners know that hear me on Dr. Deagle, I do get to talk a little bit. At some point, my source will let me know, and I will let you know. We have a caller on hold here, Linda in Ohio. Good morning, Linda.
Hi, John. I just got my new video, so I needed to ask you, and thank you for updating, because I have new listeners listening in, and so, they haven't heard any of this information before, so I know you think it's repetition, but...
Well, coming into this cold, it can be quite a shock, to say the least, but go ahead, Linda.
I understand. Are the lakes being affected? I live about 30 miles away from Lake Erie.
Right, or
just the ocean.
The larger the body of water, the more it's going to there's going to be problems. What's your altitude above sea level, Linda?
I used to know, but I've been going to work in and out so much I can't remember anymore, but I will find out.
Okay. Well, Google Earth, you can find the altitude of any place above sea level, any place on the planet with Google Earth.
Okay.
And how far away from the Atlantic Ocean are you?
Oh, I'm in Ohio.
Oh, you're in Ohio.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, well, you're far enough inland. You got mountains between you and the ocean. You're probably going to be okay. I'd want to be some altitude above Lake Erie, maybe 100 feet or so, because there's going to be a lot of things other than just the oceans coming out of their basins. There'll be 200-mile-an-hour winds. There'll be earthquakes. There'll be a lot of meteors hitting our dear old planet here. But as far as Lake Erie is concerned, I would just want to be maybe 100 feet or so above the lake level, just for a bit of a margin of safety. What's the nearest city that you're near, Linda, and how far are you from it?
The nearest big city is Cleveland. Yes. Cleveland.
And how far are you from Cleveland?
About, I'd say, 75 miles.
Okay, well, that's not as far away as I'd like to see, but it's not too bad. You live in a fairly small town?
Yes.
Okay. Well, these small towns, is there a lot of agriculture in your area? Farming, ranching?
Yes, there is, as a matter of fact.
Okay. All right. Well, people involved in agriculture tend to be fairly independent. It's just part of their lifestyle. Most of these men that have these tractors and farm equipment, they take great pride in being able to repair and maintain almost everything on their equipment without any outside help. So you've got in your neighborhood a lot of very independent people who are used to taking care of themselves. That's a real good thing, Linda.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for the information. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Here's a top 10 list. I put this together for Dr. Deagle. It looks like September 3rd, 2010. And number one, at least 2 gravity feed, high-quality gravity feed, Berkey water filters. I do offer them for sale on my website. You don't want anything that takes electricity or pressure to work your water filter. Number 2, at least one 30-caliber rifle and 500 rounds of ammunition for each adult. Of course, these skills and to go with that, owning a weapon of any kind. Number 3, cast iron cook pots and skillets with cast iron lids. They can be used indoors. They can be used on campfires and will last for decades if properly cared for. You need a truck or a large van, preferably diesel, so that you can carry people and supplies and equipment. Number 5, heavy canvas tents or tarpaulins for emergency shelter for yourself or for unexpected guests. Number 6, 900 pounds of grain per person per year, at least a 2-year supply of grain per person. Properly stored so that when the weevils hatch out, and there's weevil larvae in all bulk grains, so that they can't live. You can store it in nitrogen, in carbon dioxide, in a vacuum. There's different ways to do that. And number 7, a comprehensive medical kit, same kind of kit that the paramedics use, and of course the skills to go with it. A good place to get a professional grade paramedic kit is Galls, Galls, Galls.com. They have the same things that the paramedics use because they sell to the paramedics. Number 8, heavy leather high-top boots. This is kind of a generic way of saying buy your boots, trousers, jackets, gloves, hats at the same place the farmers and construction workers buy their clothing and boots. Not the cheap, lightweight stuff sold at sporting goods stores that won't last. That's meant for casual, recreational use. Much of the things they sell at places like Walmart simply aren't durable enough, especially the boots and shoes. I've never seen a pair of boots and shoes at Walmart that I would put any trust in for long-term heavy use. Number 9, vacuum-packed heritage garden seeds. It kind of speaks for itself. You're going to be growing your own food, maybe growing in a little bit extra food so you have something to trade or sell. Number 10, a copy of the book entitled Dare to Prepare. Dare to Prepare by Holly Deyo, D-E-Y-O, available at Stan and Holly's website, standeyo.com. The 3 additional items we put on this list for Dr. Deagle. Number 1 is the Paratrooper bicycle. It's the only, as far as we know, the only full-size folding mountain bike. It is military issue to the U.S. Army paratroopers and the U.S. Marines. Next would be a hand crank AM/FM weather band radio. I do offer these for sale at my website. It's also got a built-in flashlight and a cell phone charger. So it's a pretty good little unit, very compact and just a great little unit. And last but not least, a radiation detector with a gamma ray spectrometer. Radiation is part of what we're dealing with here, of course. This Fukushima event is by far and away far worse than what happened at Chernobyl in Russia more than 20 years ago. Far worse. So that's the list. As Linda pointed out, Linda from Ohio a few minutes ago, we always have new listeners. Being exposed to this material for the first time can be quite shocking. A lot of people, it's so far away from their belief system that they simply outright reject it, and I expect that. That's why I go back frequently to the fact, and it is a fact, scientifically provable fact, and I've got some of the evidence at my website, that 2 years ago, last month, it was June 12th, 2010, the Gulf Stream stopped. This is one of the many effects of the 10th planet, or Nibiru, on our planet, and they're secondary effects. It's not a direct effect, it's a secondary effect. Back in 1979, when the scientists with our government and the various world governments, once they satisfied themselves that Nibiru was real and where it was located with the Pioneer 10 space probe, they began making their preparations, part of continuity of government contingency planning. They also developed their cover story. The goal of our government and the world governments is to keep everybody going to work Monday through Friday, paying their mortgages, being distracted with professional sports and other things, to the last minute. And I think they'll be 97-98% successful in that effort because of their Loctite grip on mass media. So the cover story they developed was that there's going to be something called human human-created climate change, human-created global warming. That's the cover story that they decided on in 1979. It's not just a fantasy put out by Al Gore. Al Gore is the most visible spokesman, but this is the storyline put out by NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and the National Aeronautical and Space Administration, that human beings and human activity is creating greenhouse gases, which in turn is warming the planet. That's a complete fabrication, a complete fantasy. And even little children can tell you about carbon footprints now and how we should all have a smaller carbon footprint. What a bunch of malarkey that is, as my friend Lucas would say. But they've been wildly successful in obfuscation and confusing the issues, convincing people that things are something other than what they really are, and they will continue to be. In the meantime, if you become a student of my work, a student of Professor McCanny, a student of Immanuel Velikovsky, Zechariah Sitchin, and others, you can learn the truth. The truth is, what we're experiencing is cyclical in nature. It's a long cycle, 3,600 years, and in human lifetime, that's a lot of lifetimes. 3,600 years. You figure 4 generations per century times 36 centuries. That's a lot of That's a lot of generations. The cyclical nature of this planet, going away from us for 1,800 years and coming back towards us for 1,800 years in a binary star system. I get emails from all kinds of people claiming they have photographs, claiming this, claiming that. It's natural to want to see this thing. 12 years ago, when I found out about it, more than 12 years ago, I began that quest myself. I came to realize it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if I see a photograph of it or not. Eventually, I will see photographs that are authentic, and so will you. Eventually, we'll see the real deal, and here in the Northern Hemisphere. By then, we'll be down to the final few months, if not a few weeks or days, before all hell breaks loose. I encourage you to, now don't get caught up in a quest trying to find a photograph of the 10th planet of Nibiru. It's pointless. It serves no purpose. What you need to do is educate yourself about this cycle, where every 3,600 years, every civilization on the planet gets mashed down to the mud. Lucas told that story quite well in his first DVD. It's mainstream archaeology, by the way. Very mainstream archaeology. And they offer no explanation. Mainstream archaeology offers no explanation for all the civilizations on Earth 3,600 years ago collapsing, coming to a halt. They don't. I know why. And when you educate yourself, you will know why as well. It's very important that you educate yourself. Take the time to do the serious reading necessary. And it's going to take a lot of reading. Watching the 4 hours of my DVD is a good start, but that's all it is. At the end of my second disc, I give a fairly extensive bibliography of books that you can use to educate yourself. It's probably 20,000 to 30,000 pages worth of reading. Oh yeah, I'm quite serious here. There's a lot to learn. If you think you can have a comprehensive understanding of these matters by watching a 4-hour lecture that I put together, well, you're sadly wrong. That's just a beginning point. That's just a teaser. This is all that is. And I would urge you not to make major life decisions and major changes in career or where you live, the part of the country you live, based only on watching my 4-hour lecture. I think you need to do more homework than that. I stand behind what's in my lecture. I document what's in my lecture. And it's solid. If it wasn't solid, I would have been hammered into the ground long ago. This first disc came out in first week of September 2008. That's be 4 years ago this September. The second disc came out just a little over a year ago. So no, what I have there is very real and very provable. I offer some of the evidence there at my website with the U.S. Navy images of the Gulf Stream before it stopped and the Navy images of the Gulf Stream after it stopped, which of course is where we are right now. The Gulf Stream having stopped and its effect on the ocean current and weather is why we're experiencing the unprecedented heat here in North America. There is no precedent. We have weather records going back to about the 1880s in much of the country. This is the hottest year ever recorded in the 130 years or so of record keeping. Unprecedented. And what will happen in the future in terms of weather, I can't tell you. I think I can tell you with some certainty that it will be worse. It will have more frequent, more bizarre, and more dangerous weather events. Extremes of drought and extremes of too much rain. Extremes of high temperatures, extremes of low temperatures. Days where we have 200 and 300 tornadoes in one day. Who ever heard of such a thing? 200 and 300 tornadoes in one day. Earthquakes in places that have never had earthquakes. As you see these things increase, become daily events, you'll know, because I've told you so, you'll know that we're getting closer to the end. The end being when Nibiru, the 10th planet, the destroyer, impacts us to the point where we have a tilt of the Earth's axis, and these oceans come out of their basins. That's what's going to cause the worldwide flooding. They tilt, what's called a pole shift. I can't tell you how many degrees it'll be. It's probably going to be in the range of 15 to 20 degrees, something like that. That may not sound like much. That is huge. That is massive. Poles don't need to flip 180 degrees. They don't have to flip 90 degrees. A 15 or 20 degree shift in the poles would be enough to cause coastal flooding on all continents. That's all it would take. And when I use the word all it will take here, that's a massive, massive thing. They have something the size of our Earth tilt its axis 15 or 20 degrees. One of the difficulties I had putting this whole thing together was that the Navy veterans I was debriefing, they were sitting in the folding chairs getting the information. They were not the scientists who put the information together. And so the Navy veterans were told what would happen. They were not told why it would happen or how. They were told these oceans would come out of their basins. They weren't told what would precipitate that, what would make this happen. I had to find that out myself. That's when I found out there was a bulge of water at the equator, not quite 500 feet above sea level, being measured at Cornwall, England, held in place by gravity and rotation of the Earth. Anything that disrupts where true north is, disrupts the rotation of the Earth, will disrupt that bulge of water, which is hundreds of thousands of cubic miles of water, north and south of the equator, going north and south more than 1,000 miles each direction. That's a massive bulge of water. And once that water is disrupted, and if you're near a coastal area, well, baby, watch out. You're going to be underwater. One of my consultation clients down in Texas, he's about 80 miles from the Gulf Coast. I arrive at his home, about to get out of the Suburban. I look down and I see sand and seashells in all the ground, everywhere, the entire region there, sand and seashells. I looked him straight in the eye and I said, this used to be under the ocean. He got kind of quiet because his wife was standing there and he had not told his wife yet. And he said, yes, John, it was. Much of East Texas used to be under the ocean. Even areas 80 and 100 miles from the ocean, where the ocean is now, used to be under the ocean. And those are our seashells. They're not the fossil seashells. They are the seashells. So it wasn't millions and millions of years ago. They're just plain old seashells like you'd find next to any ocean right now. Have been laying there for about 3,600 years. So this is your wake-up call, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I started out the show with a warning. I'm going to wrap it up with the same warning because I know there's people that can't tune in the entire show. One of my trusted, private, confidential sources tells me that military dependents that are stationed with their spouses on the Atlantic coast, Pacific coast, and Gulf coast are now attending briefings. They have to sign non-disclosure agreements, briefings that they could soon get a bug-out order, where they would be ordered to leave these coastal areas, taking only the equivalent of a carry-on bag and one suitcase, abandoning everything else. They may get as much as 2 weeks' notice before they get this order. They may not get 2 weeks' notice. This notice would probably, we believe, be given sometime in the next 4 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. We don't know. It's not the kind of thing that would be given a year in advance or 6 months in advance, anywhere from a month to maybe 3 months out, maybe as far as October. A lot of speculation about what may or may not happen in October. So we got part of July, all of August, September, and in October. It'd be October, about 3 months. Close enough. So that's your heads up. That is your heads up. That these briefings are being conducted. They're telling these people that the planet Nibiru is going to be causing flooding of all coastal areas worldwide. They're being shown a map that's very similar to the map in my DVD, Global Warming, What the Government's Been Telling You, the map that I recreated with the help of 3 Navy veterans who saw the classified map the U.S. Navy displayed at their briefings going back to 1979. This is your heads up. Whatever you need to do to make your list of priorities, start working on it for your preparations, you need to be doing it. Time is of the essence. Time is of the essence. There's going to be some things similar in a lot of these lists and some things different. You all have our own situation to deal with. You know what your situation is. Just do it. I do private consultations, by the way, details at my website, thelibertyman.com. If you need some help gaining some clarity and focus as to what you're doing, I'll be glad to do that for you and with you. Hopefully this will blow over. We'll get through this fall, get past the fall elections, and life will be grand. We can enjoy a joyous Christmas season where we celebrate the birth of our Lord Jesus and celebrate January 1st, 2013 with no major problems. I really, sincerely hope and pray that is what happens. I would not be carrying out my duty as a journalist, however.
Radiation in the infrared and the X-ray bands, which are picked up by the IRAS telescope and other telescopes that are consortiums of international cooperative research going on with the Pi-Meson telescope under the ice sheet in Antarctica and also in other countries. There's been an astronomer actually come on air in Brazil, it's well known, that said that now they can see it. I mean, there's no doubt that there's an object in our solar system that comes back every 3,600 plus years, that this object can cause gravitational waves that can affect earthquakes and volcanoes, and it can cause coronal mass ejections. And we're moving into solar cycle 24 by next year. We're going to see some major CMEs. There's one actually heading toward Earth as we speak that's actually holocentric, which means it's actually it's going to be a direct hit, and we don't know how bad the damage will be because it's a lower X class, which is the highest class of radiation, but it's the lower part of that scale. It could potentially cause ground radiation, cellular occurrence. It could blow power generators, power lines, and affect ground-level communications and satellites. And our civilization couldn't stand a Harrington event, 1859 again, because if it happened in our day and age, our civilization would screech to a halt with no gasoline pumped, no cars delivering food, no trucks, no freeway activity, no lights, no internet, no communications by telephone or any other means, we would have some real serious problems almost immediately.
Well, it would be instantaneous, Dr. Bill. Here's what's going on. The dependence of people in the military who are considered part of the continuity of government contingency planning, which is a tiny, tiny part of the U.S. military, maybe 2 or 3%,
right,
are getting briefings that they need to be on a standby. They may get as much as 2 weeks' notice. They may not get that much to pack up a carry-on bag, one bag of luggage, and abandon all the other personal property, clothing, appliances, furniture, and get out of Dodge. These briefings began last week, and my contacts will alert me when this thing goes down. We're expecting any time between now and possibly the 1st of November. These briefings would not be conducted 6 months or 8 months in advance, anywhere from 1 month to 3 or 4 months at the most.
Yeah, from my sources, I mentioned this program. A lot of people are very skeptical. Oh, Deagle, you're just making it up. Just like they said I was making it up about the RFID chip that was approved 6 months before the Affordable Care Act 2.5 years ago by Sebelius from Health and Human Services, and then incorporated as a Class 2 device in the people who are opted in the Obamacare program, all children and every adult, and also, not only that, forced, quote, mandatory vaccinations for adults. And that could be up to 50-plus vaccines. I mean, people don't understand just how crazy things are. And also, the government's fully aware of this. And the fact that they're not allowing the population to be aware and to start doing civil defense, because the government, including FEMA, doesn't really have any resources. They just manage the resources that are in place. So
that's right.
That stops. We need to have deputized people. We need to have people with personal resources. We need to have alternative power supplies. When I contacted after the September 8th problem last year, the local authorities here in Southern California, to find out here, or in not only across America but in any country, virtually every country has backup power for pumping water. But nobody, and I haven't found any country or any place yet in America or Canada or anywhere, has backup power generators for treating sewage. So after 4 days on average...
without the other.
Right, so after 4 days they have to shut off the water, not because they can't pump, because they have backup power generators for the fire department and for the cities and towns across America and elsewhere. They don't have backup power supplies for treat the sewage, so they have to shut off the water. Now, 4 days without water and your Liverpool protocol, you're dead.
Well, the reason for this, Dr. Bill, the fire departments and fire districts are the ones that made sure there was power for the water. And the fire districts really don't care about sewage. It's really not their interest. They want to make sure they can put out fires.
Right. Yeah. Now, the other thing is the power supplies are more and more fragile. And our systems, by the way, when we now have gone to the smart grid, makes it easier for the Blue Army in China to actually hack in and destroy our power grid. And we're in a sense, in a technical economic phase of a world war against China and Russia right now. This is not a maybe. This is already happening. That war, in the sense, the warning shot was September 11th, 2001. We're in the 11th year, and I expect this year the self-inflicted wound of the debt monster they've unleashed that will destroy Europe and form a federated Europe is the move toward a grab for powerful global government. And they don't mind if they release a plague in the time or they don't deal with Fukushima, because now we've got resistant rubella and resistant TB showing up in Japan because we have a weakened population. And people think, oh, no, Dr. Deagle, it's all made up. We're not going to have a plague of H5N1, H1N1. I have the documents. 1997, 15 years ago, March 16th, I got them right from Zurich, from the World Health Organization headquarters in Basel, given to me by scientists and doctors in a private meeting, who gave me the documents. The WHO were directly planning this. They actually made the AIDS virus. They had a vaccine that they've been sued internationally regarding to stop pregnancy in the human chorionic gonadotropin. The World Health Organization, these globalists, are mass murderers. And people say, Dr. Deagle, that's just an exaggeration. It's a conspiracy theory. It's a way to besmirch my name to say this. I'm not saying this because it's nice. I'm saying it because we could stop it. If we just had a tiny portion of even the population wake up and say, I think that Deagle may be telling the truth. And that means senators and congressmen. I have had now a month of harassing Senator Wyden and getting nowhere. So now I started calling Senator Dianne Feinstein regarding what happened at Fukushima. And I expect within the next few weeks, maybe months, a major burp of radiation from Japan, and we're not going to have any advance warning whether it's an air flight that goes through a giant radioactive plume, or radiation brought to ground by rain, or just by air masses that brings it to ground even in broad daylight without rain. We have no advance warning that we're going to have a major radiation burp that's going to hit our populations. And the doctors are not trained in environmental medicine to pick up subacute radiation sickness. They're not going to have any idea when people start brushing their teeth and bleeding, getting disoriented and vertigo, getting vomiting, having all kinds of problems with bloody diarrhea, difficulty with weird infections showing up all of a sudden, people acting, hair falling out, decorticate, breaking out in ulcers and sores all over their body like they had a sunburn, but there's no sun. The doctors are not trained, okay? They're not going to know how to pick this up. I don't think anybody should be practicing medicine or nursing or any health profession, including chiropractic or naturopathy, unless they have some additional training in environmental medicine and civil defense. I think it's an obscenity that doctors in the 21st century don't know more environmental medicine. And I've mentioned that with Dr. William Ray. I think it should be a requirement of medical school, chiropractic, naturopathy, and any, quote, helping profession that thinks that they know. And we need those kind of training things, too, for policemen and firefighters, because they're going to be involved with the local dealing with environmental disaster, because we're going to have them.
Absolutely. Well, they should. Most of these doctors, Dr. Bill, would spend a 40-year career and never see anything related to radiation in their entire career. So
they won't recognize it. Listen, I worked in Central Illinois, and I was the director of the Occupational Environmental Clinic at the Pekin Hospital. We had one of the largest nuclear reactors in the United States was one of our clients. And I can tell you the local doctors didn't have the faintest clue how to recognize radiation sickness. If they had a worker that was exposed to radioactive releases inside the reactor site, they had no idea how to diagnose them. They had no idea even how to look at their peripheral blood smear, what cell type changes would occur, what kinds of symptoms people would present with the CNS or otherwise. They didn't have the faintest clue.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, not even the faintest clue, yeah. Ann, are you there?
Yes, I am.
When we come back, I want to hear an update on what's going on with the CME that's incoming. We have a holocentric.
I saw those on a
red cockroaches. Now,
now,
is this a new color, or is it mutating, or what's happening?
I have no idea, Dr. Bill. But we did have a flare from AR1520, and AR1520 is in the middle of the solar disk. And when you have a region, sunspot region, that's in the middle of the solar disk, then anything that comes out of that region will be Earth-oriented. In other words, it'll be coming towards the Earth. It won't just be on the side of the Earth. It'll come directly at us. And they've already had this was a very strange flare. It was an X1.4. Now, the current event they think was an X54. And remember, they were talking about a logarithmic scale.
Right.
So we're talking multiples of 100. But we do know from the current event that an X54 is possible. And it could be possible in the sunspot cycle in the either this year or next year or the year after that.
Right. And we're in that danger zone.
We're in that danger zone for the next 3 years. And what happened was that they strobed a pulse of extreme ultraviolet radiation. So we had the electrons, and the electrons hit the Earth and went down the magnetic lines of force. And then we had a strobe, like I said, of ultraviolet. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of people with sunburns, because that ultraviolet is coming through the atmosphere now. And
people need to realize that the weaker frequencies like A will tan you, B will burn you, C will actually cause cancer. It can actually go through objects like clothing. D is so powerful it even goes through the side of a building. People don't understand that ultraviolet light is not just a minor thing. The D means death. And cosmic background radiation, a lot of it, when you see the sun during the day, there's a time if the ozone layer was gone and you went out during the day with the sun's radiation, it would kill you. You would not be able to go out during the day if the sun was not shielded by the ozone layer.
So after that, and the protons, of course, the protons are, 7,000 times heavier than the electrons, which is why they come in afterwards. And they charged up the atmosphere, and they even had auroras around the South Pole. Now, that is very, very unusual. But they have pictures of them up on spaceweather.com. So that's how strong the proton storm was. Although they only mention it as an S1, solar storm level 1, and they go up to a 5. So it's possible that it could go higher. They're still watching it, but so far it's still at an S1. Now, in addition, it unleashed a CME, and that's a coronal mass ejection. A coronal mass ejection is a cloud that is very complicated and very compact magnetic lines of force. It's not an electrical magnetic force. It's just magnetic. So it involves our magnetosphere, which it goes in at the North Pole, comes out at the South Pole, and circles around the Earth.
Right.
Excuse me.
You can actually push it into the Earth and push it out the other side as well. When those kind of forces come in, they actually push it like a balloon being pushed through the water. It pushes it down toward the surface of the Earth and pushes the magnetic flux field of the Earth and the lines of force out into space on the opposite side of the planet.
Yeah, the dark side.
Yeah.
As it turns out, we've had a fairly strong IMF, and that's an interplanetary magnetic force. And you see in IMF, when the sun, for instance, is trying to align its magnetic field with a planet's magnetic field, or when a planet is trying to align its magnetic field with one of its moons. So they know about the IMF, and in our case, the Earth with the sun, it flips direction every 8 days. So that means that if we were to align our magnetosphere with the sun's, our magnetosphere would be flipping from north to south every 8 days. Wow. All right, that's bad to think about.
Yeah,
anyway, the coronal mass ejection, now they've updated they think that it's coming in faster than they thought, and they think that it's going to come in about it's the 14th, that's Saturday, about 9 UT, so you subtract 5 to get to Central Time, and 9 minus 5 is 4. So at 4 a.m. Tomorrow morning, it will be hitting the Earth, and then it'll continue to hit the Earth. You have to understand this cloud is bigger than the Earth, much bigger than the Earth. And so it'll continue to hit the Earth as the Earth turns. And so just because it hits at, let's say, 4 a.m., that doesn't mean that that's all there is. It's not a strobe. It's a continuous beam of magnetism. And you're right, it'll push the magnetosphere towards the Earth on the sunlit side and away from the Earth on the dark side. Now, on the dark side, you'd think you wouldn't have any impacts from that. But as it turns out, when the magnetosphere is stretched out on the dark side, the electrons that circle the magnetic lines of force are pulled back towards the Earth, and they actually accelerate back towards the Earth. There's an acceleration of the electrons back towards the Earth, so you do get electrical effects on the dark side of the Earth.
The other thing is, if you're flying at low altitude during a CME where the magnetic flux field of the Earth is pushed in deeply, you can actually be flying at 30 to 40,000 feet, and you're actually above the magnetosphere of the Earth, or low Earth orbit satellites, and these satellites can get fried because of cosmic background radiation, or you can get a major increase in even space-based radiation, even if you're at altitude. So the NOAA posted this in 2007, and I talked about it when I sent my information to Senator Wyden, that there's a certain amount of background solar and cosmic radiation, but when you're flying at altitudes when there's a CME, that might be 10 or 20 or 30 times higher radiation. That's why your astronauts during a CME have to go inside special chambers of the International Space Station so they don't get cooked. 800 square miles. It's got a greater than 1% chance of an impact on the Earth in the next period of time. When do they expect the passage of the Earth? What date do they expect it to pass?
Yeah, they've already figured that out, and that would be February 16th, 2013. So we're looking.
Isn't that interesting? The day after my birthday. So, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah, February 15th is my birthday. I was born midnight Valentine's.
Anyway, this asteroid is not one that's in the asteroid belt. This is an asteroid that came into the solar system. And
from the Oort cloud. It said Oort cloud, so it might be. You mentioned something that John mentioned. Can you tell us about that?
Well, he thinks that it could be part of the scraps that follow the Nibiru planet.
Yeah, in other words, it's orbital debris that's around the red dwarf star that's coming into our solar system.